Hey, Mr. McLaren here. So I'm going to be showing off this program, Stellarium, to help with when I take my students stargazing when we go to outdoor school. So there's a couple things I wanted to talk about relative to zodiac signs because the kids have been really into that with something they've been doing in language arts. And yeah, like you may have wondered, where do these zodiac signs come from? And there's a couple of videos I've seen online talking about them forming a circle in the sky. That can be a little bit misleading. So I want to talk about the zodiac signs while actually looking at the night sky. And this program makes it really easy to look at the night sky at different times and different years. So we can set it to like 2018, or we can set it to like year 2 or year 0, right? But we can't. Oh, actually, we can go to negatives. That's cool. Didn't realize that. So you can look at different times, and I want to talk about this zodiac, the circle of the zodiac. And so I'm going to be talking about a little bit what you can see in the night sky at different times of the year. So let's say you've just made you're just making dinner and the sun's going down, and you see to your east there's this constellation of stars. And then you make your dinner, eat your dinner, you do your dishes, and like an hour or two later you see that this constellation's higher up in the sky. It's no longer just over to the mountains to your east, but it's higher up. And then maybe you wake up in the middle of the night, and now that constellation is directly above you. So you may be noticing a pattern that's happening here. And that same constellation seems to be setting as soon as the sun is rising. So it appears to be moving like it's the opposite of the sun. So that might make you very intrigued with that constellation. You might think there's something special about that constellation, seeing how the sun is definitely a special thing. So these stars seem to be rotating around opposite of the sun. So you look the next night, and you look to your east, and yep, that constellation's there again. So you do this every day. You look at the to your east every day when you're going to dinner. You know something weird. The stars seem to be higher up every day. They're no longer just above the mountains, but sometimes when the sun is setting, they're really high up. And so you keep track of this. You keep a journal. You draw maps of the night sky right when the sun is setting. And you notice that, hey, during different months, it seems to be going across the sky as well. And it's no longer opposite the sun. So if we look at when the sun is setting, it's no longer just about to rise. It's pretty high up. So it seems that these constellations are spinning around like the sun, but at a slightly different rate that over a long time makes them no longer opposite. And this is what people thought. They thought, hey, maybe these constellations are spinning around the Earth and there's something special about them. And they noticed that given enough time, that constellation should, in theory, be behind the sun. And so if we turn on our... Oh, before I go to that, let's also look north, because you might know something interesting. If we look north, during different times of the night, you might see the night sky seems to be rotating around a certain point. That point is pretty darn close to Polaris, this really bright star in the sky. And so this was, it's named like the North Pole. If you were to go straight up from the North Pole, you would get pretty close to Polaris. And so, because it's on the axis of rotation, or close to the axis of rotation. Like if the Earth was a wheel spinning on an axis, if you went straight up from the North Pole, you would get to Polaris. And you would be able to see this on the northern hemisphere, not the southern hemisphere. There's a similar group of stars in the southern hemisphere, but in the northern hemisphere there was just this one bright one. So people were pretty certain the constellations were spinning around. And they gave names to these clusters of stars. and they started mapping the stars, and it was very useful to them. I mean, there's a lot of stories that you can put with this stuff, but basically one of the really cool things is that Polaris is part of this one constellation, Ursa Minor, or is it Ursa Minor? And it seems to spin around. And this constellation is different heights from the northern horizon, depending on how far north or south you are on the planet. So just to be really simplistic, if you're at the equator, this would actually be really close to the horizon. If you're at the North Pole, it would actually be straight up, so not at like a 45-degree angle. I'm in Springfield, Oregon right now, so it's about 45 degrees up from the northern hemisphere. So you can use how far north or high up that is in the sky to tell how far north or south you are. And so people were able to use constellations to figure out how far north or south they were, and then they would be able to use that to figure out exactly where they were, if they got lost, or if they're trying to make a journey across oceans. This is a type of mapping method that is actually very, very old. And then also you can do the same thing with the sun, because the sun will be at different heights relative to the southern hemisphere. Depending on where you are on the earth. And yes, it does go up and down with the seasons, but if you know what time of year it is, you should be able to adjust for that. Okay, so back to the zodiac. Hey, that rhymed. So if we look here directly east of us, there's this, right now there's Libra, and that might sound similar, and Virgo also might sound similar, I believe. And then Leo, Cancer, Gemini, and I think, let's just go back a little bit in time. Yeah, Taurus is right there. And so these are all of our zodiac signs, and they seem to be going in this arc that the sun went in the sky. And so those are the zodiac signs. But the sign that you have at a certain month is actually the sign that's behind the sun. So if I look at where the sun is right now, in December, Sagittarius is really close to right behind the sun, and you can approximate, if you figure out the whole ring, if you know what's opposite Sagittarius, and you see that up in the middle of the sky at midnight, you can figure out that Sagittarius is behind the sun. And so during December, the zodiac sign is Sagittarius. If you look at, let's say, November, then you've got Scorpius right there now. That's actually, ooh, what did I just do there? Okay, let's go to, actually, just go to midday. So I'm gonna actually, and you can see that with the days it changes slightly too. I'm just gonna be in the middle of the month. Actually, no, let's go to like, I think it's not the middle of the month, it's like the beginning of the month, isn't it? It's like, yeah, Sagittarius is at the beginning of the month. So I think it's either Scorpius and then is it Libra and then Virgo? And then, so yeah, Sagittarius, and then the next one would be Capricornus, or being a Capricorn. Aquarius, it would be the next one. Pisces, not sure, is that Aries for the next one? Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, and I think Libra next, and Scorpius, and Sagittarius. So you can, so those are those different zodiac signs. It's basically what was behind the sun. And so let's go to like 2018. So we're going to be actually looking at the night sky on October 11th, 2018. And let's go to when the sun is setting. So when the sun's set, directly to our east, we should be able to see Pisces, and then Aquarius, Capricornus, and Sagittarius. And we should also be able to see Mars is going to be to the south, and so is Saturn. So we'll be able to see those two planets. And so basically the solar system, everything's arranged on one plane, or like kind of like a plate. Like all the planets are spinning pretty close to each other on the same plane. And so Mars and Saturn and all these other planets should also be appearing to travel across these zodiac signs. And so people noticed that they saw these objects that were kind of like stars, but they had some color to them. They appeared a little bit bigger than a lot of the stars, and so they thought those were also special, and they gave them names and stories as well, linked to their gods and their traditions. But we should be able to see these guys rotating slowly but surely in the night sky. So in the middle of the night, directly above us should be Pisces. Now remember, Pisces is not the sign for October. It's actually directly opposite the sign for October. But this is that circle. Like, I don't like the image of a literal circle in the night sky. It's following the path of the sun, is how I like to think of it. And you can see that when you look at these different days and you look at these different times. And people kept very extensive records of this. They drew a lot of maps, and they saw this. But we have Stellarium, which lets us do this really quickly and see the general trend pretty darn easily. We should also be able to see Ursa Minor, because it's always visible in the northern hemisphere. And we should also be able to see Ursa Major in America. These are called Little Dipper and Big Dipper. I believe right as the sun is setting, we should be able to see, we should be able to see Ursa Major. But then it's going to kind of get close to the horizon and then come back up around after midnight. But we probably won't be up that late. But we'll definitely be able to see those two constellations. Those are usually pretty easy to see. And we should be able to spot these guys out, knowing where they are. But I would highly recommend, if you're ever going stargazing, to have something on your phone. Like I've got Sky Safari 5, but it needs Wi-Fi and GPS location to be able to just point your phone up and look and see what's behind the phone, which is a really cool feature, by the way, but we won't have Wi-Fi up where we're going, so I didn't want to rely on that. So yeah, that's how you find the zodiac signs. It's where the sun would be in the sky, that path that they would go on. There's one other constellation that I want to look at. There's Orion's belt. That's one of my favorites. I feel like whenever I look in the night sky, I see this. Orion's belt. But unfortunately, that night, we're not going to be able to see Orion until like midnight, basically. That one is super easy to see. It's got 3 really bright stars right in a line, so that sticks out. So if you are up at midnight that night, then you'll be able to see Orion coming up from the east, setting in the west, and it's pretty close to the zodiac signs. It's just a little bit south of them, so it has the issue where it's really visible during some months and it's just not in the night sky for other months. So yeah, that's the zodiac signs, and that's how it works, and that's the general concept of where it came from. And I'm really looking forward to going stargazing with my students, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for joining me. This has been Mr. McLaren.